Everyone, hello and welcome to this month's Coffee Chat. Thank you everyone for joining us. It is the 4th of July, so if you are in the United States, go find something better to do, unlike the rest of us. We're not taking our own advice there, but nevertheless, we are happy that you are joining us to talk about Monero, as always. Drop in questions in the chat. We will go through those, and this is what a normal coffee chat is. Today, you have me, Justin. You have Vic, who's joining us by car. You have Scott, who's joining us also, and Howard, who is coming back in. Howard, is it working on your end now?
You tell me. How's this going?
It sounds really good to me, so I'm assuming it is. So, seems to be working just fine. All right, perfect. You want to introduce yourself, Howard?
Wow. What do I say about myself this time?
You're bored today, so you're on.
That's right. It's a rainy day here in Ireland today, and yeah, so I had nothing else better to do than to drink coffee with you guys.
That's a good reason to have people on the coffee chat, right? What about you, Scott? What are you on here today for?
Just to help out, contribute to conversation where I can, if there's any relevant points that I can contribute to. So
nice. Vic?
Hey, how you doing? Sorry, I'm driving, so I won't be looking at the camera. Yeah, I'm here. I mean, this last week we talked about a bunch of stuff, such as the icon on Twitter. Like we saw BNB got their own icon. And then Justin, you and I went back and forth a little bit talking about how we could have a Monero symbol on the unicode emoji thing. So yeah, I'd like to hear what everyone has to say about that.
Perfect. I think we can just start us off there. So the last week, maybe 2 weeks, there's been some discussion on Twitter about, after Bitcoin getting its original little B logo, then other projects started getting logos showing up. It's seemingly random. I think BNB, Binance Coin got one. And then I thought I saw Tron get one. So I don't know if this is like a temporary promotion for some of these coins or if it's a permanent thing. I'm not sure who we need to talk to in order to get one for Monero, but of course it would be really nice to have one for Monero. And then beyond that, we were having some thoughts about what it would look like. It'd just be the little Monero logo. And then that spiraled also into conversations about getting a little Monero M for Unicode, which is, a common set of symbols that are used for, chats, text, all parts of the internet and all sorts of applications. So that's something that we were talking about in the Monero community channel this past week. Something that we're going to try and get the Monero logo of some sort in Unicode. Scott, I actually want to hand it off to you, though, because you outlined like a very nice high-level plan for me, so I didn't have to do it in chat. Would you like to show your high-level plan, and that way people can have an expectation?
Well, so when I originally, for context, when I originally outlined the plan, it was in the context of I had forgotten that Monero had already kind of reused one of the international phonetic alphabet Unicode symbols, which is I forget what the exact phonetic sound is for, but yeah. So the original plan, prior to me coming into that or refreshing myself with that knowledge, I think Ray brought it up in IRC, was that, let me see if I can try to scroll on my phone here to find it on IRC and scroll back. But basically, it was originally in the next, at the time, so this was on Wednesday-ish of this week, between Wednesday of this week and whenever the next community meeting is, which should be, I think, a week from today, a couple of people can basically submit suggestions for the Unicode icon to like a meta issue. And then at the community meeting, people can, comment on it. And if there's strong consensus around some of the stuff getting removed or so forth. Then it gets removed, and then in the next week or two, the typical people who contribute to like the GUI aspects and the designer aspects of the Monero project. So DSE, Zyphon, Rayrar, those kinds of folks, they would get their own comments, and then from there we do kind of a poll on like XMarTrader subreddit and maybe Blockfolio and other places that might lend well to getting opinions from people who would be kind of the primary consumers of that symbol. And then from there, if there's a pretty clear winner, and then go out and start trying to influence the usage of the symbol in areas, so like Monero GUI, Wikipedia, and then go from there. But it's not like an easy process at all, because basically the way the Unicode consortium one of the key factors, deciding factors for the Unicode consortium approving a symbol is existing usage and a decent amount of it. So it's not like, even if we were to approve it, within, from the Monero community aspect and say, hey, this is now the official image, because it wouldn't be an actual Unicode character that exchanges or whatever should use, it would still take who knows how long, maybe a year of usage or something, before we would be able to point to a year's worth of evidence and say, hey, this is something we feel should be added based on adoption and so forth. Yeah, I see. It's to replace them with a hook, mainly because there was a misinterpretation in IRC. It was basically someone asking Vic about if we could use like the Monero logo symbol, which kind of devolved into conversations around creating a Unicode character for Monero. So yeah, it's basically, and then kind of the way the conversation ended, which is kind of how I preface this monologue to begin with, is we already have the M character from the IPA character set. And the IPA, as I said, the International Phonetic Alphabet isn't something that's highly used in the day-to-day. Like, it's not something that's going to clash against, the actual how we're using it. So people aren't going. The average layman, everyday person is not going to be like, oh, like, why is Monero using this curved M? I typically associate it with, the phonetic alphabet, which I use every day. Like, the only people who are potentially might get ruffled feathers would be linguists. And, I think Monero, the symbol, we've used the curved M for probably at least, I want to say, 3 years. But yeah, anyways, that's my long monologue on the background of Unicode potentials. So I don't know if it's worth continuing down that route. I was actually going to create a poll today on XMarTrader and get an opinion on whether or not people even think it's worthwhile to try and create a something that's, if you look at the character set, basically for currencies, typically you have like a slash, which is used to like donate a group. So you have B with the 2 slashes. You have the euro with the There's basically, typically the symbology plays out is there's the M doesn't necessarily align with that symbology. So if we want to make it more currency-like, we would need a new icon. But whether or not that's worth it, that's something that's best left up, in my opinion, to XMarTrader and other people who would primarily be doing exchange stuff that would have the symbols and so forth on it. So yeah.
Where did that M come from? That M that we use with the little tail on the right-hand side? Is that used somewhere else, or where did that come from?
So like, why did Monero hijack it, or?
I think he's asking like what the origins are.
Like, what is it originally? What was it meant to be, or where did it come from? Is it from a different language, or?
It's from the International Phonetic Alphabet, so it's used, normally to describe how some other sounds sound.
Yeah, so basically linguists have this character set that they use to denote phonetic sounds kind of universally, kind of, because how, if English people might interpret P might be different from how another language might interpret P. So this is kind of a agnostic character set. But
what are your thoughts, Vic? Do you think you still want to try and have our own unique symbol forced through somehow, or do you think it'd be good just to basically claim ownership of this one?
Yeah, I tell you the truth, that the Twitter, I mean, the Unicode emoji thing, yeah, it's fun, and I think we should, doesn't hurt to try. We should try create a new symbol and at least try it. Why not, right? But the Twitter one, it's just, again, just comes down to marketing and awareness, right? I mean, it's, I don't know, is it viewed as giving some certain currency some type of legitimacy? Or it's just fun. It's just fun marketing, and why not? I mean, I would say we'd try for both.
Yep, yeah, certainly. So, I mean, like I said, at the very least, I was going to throw a poll up on, I think it's XMR Trader. I forget kind of the conflicts that happen between subs and, which one is quote unquote good and bad. But so I need to double check that first. But basically whatever is the primary Monero trading set, I was going to throw basically a straw poll up and see if people like the curved M, or if they see any value in pursuing a more symbol that's more consistent with like the currency symbology that we have in the world today, and basically, yeah, one of those two. And if they see value, or at least there's enough interest, then I can certainly create a meta issue on the repository and collect suggestions, and we can go down that way. Whether or not it'll bear fruit or not will be determined, but I don't think there's much. If nothing comes of it, there's not a whole lot of energy lost. I mean, it's, people throw up a suggestion and it gets approved or not, and, DSC or Xiphon throw it up in, the Monero GUI to try and make it more official. We do like minor updates on Wikipedia to add it to one of the, if you go to like Wikipedia, you'll see that the symbol is the curved M for the Monero entry, and you just append the new symbol. It's relatively minor work. It's just whether or not people are going to use and adopt it is the thing. There's not really any point in putting energy into a symbol if people aren't going to use it, when you can put energy into other things. So whether that's Cake Wallet or community management or what have you. So
got it. Yeah, I look forward to the poll on XMR Trader just to see what general interest there is. Sounds exciting to me. And then that's independent to the Twitter marketing thing too. I mean, these are related, but they're not the same thing, right? So we can always just have the normal like actual Monero logo on Twitter, right? Like, why not? Get that icon everywhere where people start seeing it more.
Yeah, do we have any idea that should have contacted Twitter?
I don't know anybody at Twitter, sadly. I wish.
Keep writing at Jack every day. Hopefully he sees it.
Right. As far as Monero, as not really Monero Twitter, but cryptocurrency Twitter is concerned, Jack's probably the only employee at Twitter that they've ever heard of.
Hey, there's already a Unicode character for a historical international currency associated with Esperanto. So historical meaning this symbol's no longer in current use.
Interesting. Can you paste that in the chat? I can share that on YouTube too for people that are.
Okay. The code The code is Unicode 2087. Of course, it looks like an S, so it may not be what we're interested in. But there's a whole page, a Unicode page of currency symbols. So, there may be something here that we can just reuse. Again, something that isn't in current circulation.
Interesting. Yeah, it's definitely worth looking into. I'll make sure to look at that later. Okay, anything else on this topic, or should we move on to the other really juicy topics of the last month, which is Chainalysis adding support for Zcash and Dash, and Elliptic adding support for Zcash and Horizon, which is a fork of Zcash. Does anyone want to start with their thoughts here, or should I just get? I should probably cover some of the main news to begin with. So, Chainalysis and Elliptic, which are two blockchain analysis companies, at least that's how they describe themselves. They added support for, like, in their suite where you can look up certain transactions, you can look up certain addresses, and it will return the history that they have associated with those addresses and transactions, if any. So Elliptic, so Chainalysis talked a lot about how, in their view, Zcash and Dash were not especially used, or at least their privacy features were not especially used, so they could easily provide a lot of support for most transactions on the network. Elliptic, in a CoinDesk article, went a little bit further in some of their descriptions. So I want to read out a few quotes here before we have any other discussion. So first, this is from Tom Robinson, who is the chief scientist of Elliptic. I've watched at least one webinar that he's participated in, but he stated one of the core differences between us and Chainalysis is that they are really focused on law enforcement, and so they will have customers who are asking them to de-anonymize the likes of Monero, said Robinson. We provide transaction screening tools for exchanges and don't plan to offer our functionality on something like Monero, where everything is private by default. He also added one other quote that I really want to get across here in relation to the way services like these exchanges view risk, and he said the following: regulated businesses want to know whether funds are coming from shielded addresses, just as they want to know whether Bitcoin is coming from a mixer, Robinson added. That doesn't necessarily mean those funds are bad or illicit in some way. Firms just need to know in order that they can take the appropriate next steps. So those are the main things I wanted to, mention from that article. I'll paste that article in the chat here in case no one has seen the CoinDesk article yet. But I would like to open a discussion about what people's thoughts are for these companies, and adding support for Zcash, Dash, Horizon, other. I guess the main topic of the conversation is Zcash, because I think everyone here knew that this was going to happen. Chainalysis had been teasing it for quite a while, but it's finally out, and now all exchanges and services will have some ability to have Zcash tooling that will report a risk score whenever users deposit Zcash on exchanges. I guess I can hand it over to John, who's joining us, just so he can say hello. And then I want you to talk about, John, about your thoughts about Chainalysis and Elliptic adding support for Zcash and what it really means for Monero.
Howdy, everybody. Sorry, I'm late. I had to stop and get fireworks on the way home, and it took a little longer than expected. I don't see it as a huge kind of game changer. I mean, I think people were generally already aware that, optional privacy is exactly that, and it's not heavily utilized. So I don't see that having like an official option for doing chain analysis is really going to change people's opinions one way or another. I mean, people that use Bitcoin claim that it's private enough, and people who use Zcash claim that it's private enough. So I think it's not going to be a kind of game changer in any way. I mean, maybe it would kind of push I doubt it, but maybe it would kind of push Zcash to move more towards kind of opt-out privacy rather than opt-in. But also, I don't really see that happening. So I don't see it as a big catalyst for anything really happening. It's just kind of a announcement of what most people already assumed was true.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, everyone knew that. Well, so this is the problem. I want to say everybody knew, but I want to instead say everybody who has some familiarity with Zcash knows that there are different types of transactions, and Chainalysis and others can look at the vast majority of those to learn some information about them, right? So I guess my surprise that I mean, it was my prediction. I talked about this a few months ago, but I had not received confirmation from any of these services about what they actually were going to do. And that's why I'm very pleased that Elliptic talked about this publicly. But they said that they will start identifying transactions that come from the shielded pool as similar as coming from a Bitcoin mixer. To people who don't know, Chainalysis and others will label funds that come from mixers as higher risk than funds that aren't connected to like mixing or other known identifies activities. So what they're basically saying is when you deposit funds directly to an exchange from a shielded address, it might flag an internal flag for exchanges, other services that are using these tools. Do we think that this will impact the adoption of privacy technologies at all? Do you think that exchanges are more likely to basically have to ignore these alerts because ideally a bunch of people are sending funds to them from shielded addresses and they don't need to care, or it's like too much work to investigate all these people and it's not a reliable metric anyway? Or do you think it will remain a very limited use feature and therefore exchanges are just going to ask for tax returns, to speak exaggeratively, about everyone who touches the shielded pool? Scott, do you have any predictions here?
Well, so I think going back to your first question very, very briefly, I think probably on whether or not it matters, I think I think it's valuable that this information is public in the same sense that I feel like, circa 2013 with the Snowden links, like there's a lot of things that people hypothesized about, the U.S. three-letter agencies, and we're pretty sure, there's these mass surveillance technologies that are being used, but we have no real confirmation. And then through Vault 7 and Snowden, we were able to confirm them. Now, one can argue nothing meaningful has really happened because within that realm, right? But I think it's still useful because it moves it from kind of the theoretical, like we believe this is possible, to reality where we know for sure that it's happening. But as far as whether or not it matters and if exchanges are going to use it at all, I think it really boils down to, it probably is going to vary by country and the regulatory authorities. Because I mean, if we look at the IRS, I know particularly the last maybe 2 or 3 years, there's been some commentary from news media outlets about how the IRS is underfunded and they can't really go after a lot of people who are committing tax fraud and the like. So you have, if you look at at least the IRS, I don't think it really depends on what the IRS's priorities are. And as to what those priorities are, no one knows except for those who work within the IRS, which I don't, think we have a mole or anything inside the IRS to be able to gauge that. And similarly, it depends on what the priorities are of the FBI and the NSA and so forth, at least for the U.S., as to whether or not they want to spend resources to use these services by Elliptic and Chainalysis to go after people who are perhaps using these cryptocurrencies for illicit means. So whether or not the calculus that they use justifies it or not, it's really, I think, hard to say. But I mean, the IRS has, there was that contract or whatever 2 years ago, how they're paying, I think it was like $50,000, I think it was to Chainalysis, for, going after people trying to commit tax fraud and the like. So I don't think the IRS has stopped that. And if anything, it seems like in the last 8 months, they have increased their efforts a little bit, but whether or not, it really boils down to, I think they, at least for the IRS, they don't have enough heads to go after a bunch of people. They will use it, I think, but whether or not, they're able to get a notable majority of illicit transactors is another question altogether, I think.
I just want to quickly interject with one thing. According to CoinDesk, in 2019, Chainalysis received about $1.9 million from the IRS.
Okay.
And
yeah.
They also, the weird thing, they also received $1.1 million from ICE, which I don't really like to see personally. And the FBI has recently increased its purchases of Chainalysis software. In 2019, they jumped to being the largest government purchaser at $1.6 million per year. So, governments are spending a lot of money on it. Maybe that's what Elliptic was pointing to, is I don't think they have the same government contracts. I think they mostly just work with exchanges. So it wouldn't be government workers that are using the tool directly. It would be exchanges that are trying to comply with regulations that are using it.
Yeah, I would just point out, for the government side of things, I don't necessarily think that they're using kind of publicly available tools. I don't know if you guys keep an eye on job listings, but there's a pretty steady stream of job listings in Washington, D.C. suburbs, which require a top secret SCI clearance, which is like the highest clearance level you can get for the government. And it's not working directly for the government, but it is obviously government contractor. And, in the job description, it talks about an interest in cryptocurrencies, and it will name Monero and Zcash and others by name. So I think they probably are developing their own tools for doing analysis.
I don't know of any public tools that work with Monero, so I think it'd be cool to actually see what that looks like.
Yeah, you got to get a top secret SCI clearance first.
Out of curiosity, for perhaps developing kind of a monitor to gauge, growth in that area or not, is there a particular job rec place that these are getting posted, like Indeed or LinkedIn?
Yeah, I see them come up on Indeed and LinkedIn. I every month or 3, I kind of just, if you just search on LinkedIn or Indeed for blockchain or cryptocurrency, the vast majority of stuff is in the Bay Area, and it's full stack engineer. We want you to help us build some products, but there's always one or two that are, if it's on the East Coast, it's usually in Washington, D.C. area, and it's for analysis type of stuff.
I should start billing Breaking Monero and educational series that I charge $6,000 an hour to.
Yeah.
Hopefully they have something better than that, but then again, who knows? People typically haven't looked at Monero that much. Okay, Howard, did you have any additional comments you wanted to give just on the general topic of companies adding support for blockchains that have typically transparent use?
This has been a pretty long-running topic for the Monero community. All of this stuff is inevitable, and we see these people criticizing these companies for trying to de-anonymize their work, and I don't know. At this point, I just laugh because literally you're putting all of this information onto a permanent worldwide database, and then you're complaining that somebody looks at it, which I think is moronic. And all of the controversy that's been going on around it is just stupid. It is inevitable that if you put information out there in a permanent record, someone's going to analyze it.
How do we address the narrative where we typically see in the Bitcoin community where they point to these people that are doing analysis and say, it's your fault for trying to figure something out? What do we say to these people?
It's like saying, the perfect example is, why do you climb Mount Everest? Because it's there. I mean, that's what humans do. If there's a challenge out there, someone is going to tackle that challenge just because it's there. That's human nature.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a particular tact to approach that kind of. I mean, it's just kind of absurd on its face, right? I mean, just like Howard said, I mean, it's permanently inscribed on the internet forever. You can't, accuse somebody of being, that's like a 5-year-old saying no fair, right? I mean, it's just.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, no peeking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to describe it too. I mean, these arguments, these criticisms are infantile. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think I largely agree there. Like, I just don't know how else you can realistically view it where you're trying to justify that point of view. It's just so much. I guess it's easy to just call the person that looks under a rock the bad person, but it's just like, come on. Plus, you're lucky that these people actually, honestly, are the ones that are looking under the rock compared to most other people, I'd say. Everyone else that's not selling the software, the people that are going to be using it for far more nefarious purposes, or else they're going to sell it for marketing reasons or who knows what. We've only begun to hear the type of people that can sell this data.
Right. No, these people who are doing it, out in the open, they're doing the rest of the community a service because they're telling you, hey, everything that you thought was hidden is not. And, that's first an important wake up call for these people, and it is a service because they aren't trying to hide it from you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay. Any final topics on this one? I know that made some waves, and even outside of the Monero community a bit. If not, I guess we can talk about. I started. I gave a talk at a Greece meetup. Vic was there, Fluffy Pony was there, and in it, I really tried to stress the idea that Monero is a coin that provides real privacy, not potential privacy. What are our thoughts about trying to use that as a powerful marketing tool going forward to say, hey, it's not just about whether or not something is theoretically possible, it's whether or not something is actually happening.
Yeah, that's an important message, absolutely, because so many of these projects are talking about what they could possibly do, and none of them are actually delivering it in real use.
How else can we help share that message, though? Like, what types of context would be most appropriate to mention those things?
I think. Go ahead, Howard. No, I was just going to say, I think it's very, I think all this stuff, the math and the inscription is way beyond for most people. I mean, I think to break it down into what you're saying, Justin, does make sense. But because the math and the encryption, blah, 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 is so hard, there's just so many different voices out there. And it really just comes down to who to believe. So I think to break it down to what you're saying, that yes, this is actually working, I think it is the right message for sure.
Okay.
That's all.
I think part of the disease in crypto is just that everyone is sort of still has we're a startup mindset that doesn't have to necessarily deliver yet. So it's boring to pitch a functioning product.
God, that sounds familiar.
Like, oh, what's another thing? Like Monero has supported OpenAlias for a long time, right? And I'm not suggesting OpenAlias is exactly the same as a lot of the solutions that are coming out right now, but you have things like Ripple's PayID, and you have things like
FIO.
yeah, you have a bunch of projects now that are like they have their own token even in some cases, and it's basically the same function for like OpenAlias, where either you have like a different domain registration system to get your own account, who knows what. Like, no, it's hard to get people excited about OpenAlias. Oh yeah, just register a TXT thing on your domain and just call it good, right? So part of me is curious, since like the whole travel rule compliance is a big thing right now. If we like rebrand OpenAlias as like a travel rule compliance that is like meant for Monero, and just see if that like makes Monero the most compliant travel rule coin, just because that's what the industry is like right now. It's just stupid. People just everyone just jumps to say something and no one cares actually about how it works. I don't know, maybe it's just Justin ranting out the coffee chat. Are there any other topics that anyone wanted to bring up? I have a few other miscellaneous things like
just to trail on this last one. I mean, I guess now I'm curious to see what did other technologies do to get mainstream when they were first very fringe and bleeding edge. Like, how did people convince the mass public to adopt automobiles? When everybody was just happy to have a horse. I mean, the whole process of adoption has happened many times before, and we ought to be able to look up what the successful steps are.
Okay.
Without looking anything up, I mean, my instinct is that it's just utility, right? I mean, when something's really useful, eventually people kind of discover it and, see other people making use of it. And I mean, it certainly takes time. Monero's only been alive for 6 years now, right? So, but I mean, I guess, I mean, with other kinds of like products, there's advertising and stuff that goes along with that. But I would think that the real kind of key is utility.
Yeah, but again, if you think about the very first time somebody ever saw an automobile, it was this loud, spitting, gas guzzling, smoke belching machine. They probably approached it with a lot of fear and skepticism, but somehow they got over that. And I think that's really the point I was trying to get at.
I mean, I think it's like, you approach Monero and you have to download the CLI, and you need to store the whole blockchain in RAM, and it doesn't work most of the time because it doesn't use LMDB, and it I can't remember what other issues I used to have with the Monero early software, but now you just download Cake and it just kind of works, right? So part of that's refinement there, but I guess when you have like I'm maybe changing gears and we don't need to go down this route, but when you have a volatile asset, I'm kind of interested in what could actually prompt the adoption of it. But I don't know.
Well, if you look at the global economy on the verge of massive depression, literally all over the world, and currencies devaluing or whatever. I mean, I think we're heading into a point in history where all of this stuff is going to be tested right before our eyes.
Did you guys already talk about the Haven coin stuff, or is that not on the menu for today? Just when you're
I don't know
talking
what
about a
this is.
volatile asset. Oh, it's this. Supposedly, there's this Monero clone called Haven, and they are going to launch a product, I guess, called XUSD, which is supposed to be a decentralized stablecoin built on Monero, essentially. I mean, their version of Monero, but so it's like a, you have the volatile asset, but then you have this nominally decentralized stable coin tied to it, so you can transact privately using something that's not changing value constantly.
I personally don't. I just don't think we're anywhere close to having a decentralized stablecoin. I just would rather it just be centralized and just simple. Like, at the end of the day, you need to trust somebody. Just take advantage of all the centralized benefits then, right?
Yeah, I haven't looked into the mechanics of it, honestly, but I just saw it pumping and kind of was wondering
US dollars
why.
pumping?
No,
Stable coins
the
pumping?
backing assets.
Oh, okay.
And supposedly I think it's supposed to launch like the end of July or something, so that's why.
Interesting. I'll take a look. But
since you mentioned Haven, that just jogged my mind to remember Raven Coin, which was in the news very recently. Should we talk about that, or is that too off topic?
You can go ahead. I mean, Raven Coin's the one that tried doing X3000R or whatever. They just kept chucking more and more algorithms in their ASIC resistant thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the first reason that it came to my attention, was because they started, trawling around for proof of work algorithms. They looked at RandomX and decided not to implement it. And I think finally they wound up just copying ProgPow. But the reason I'm mentioning them now is, I mean, probably a lot of us have already heard that, it turns out they discovered they had a bug in their code base since about October that's allowed somebody to mint 300 million extra coins, which somebody else quoted as worth about $5 million. So I thought that was interesting to note.
So I guess, how is this not caught earlier? Or did just nobody bother to just sum up the actual supply of coins?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, how did anybody even finally notice the problem?
I imagine someone noticed because they finally looked for the first time, because it's a transparent asset. Like, it's like, how do we know that there's this many Bitcoin? I don't know. Go through, verify the sums of inputs and outputs, and see what they equal, right?
Right.
Did just no one ever do that with them, ever?
That must be the case.
Wow. So for people who are just saying you need a transparent asset in order to verify supply, well, you also need someone looking at it.
I kind of, honestly, I don't know where I saw it, but I saw somebody speculate that, I mean, because it was a relatively simple code change commit that caused this issue to arise, and it was a pull request made by some anonymous contributor, and then the core devs merged that commit, apparently without really reviewing what they were merging into their production blockchain. And so I saw somebody speculate that it was actually potentially it was the core developers using like a sock puppet account that made the pull request and then merged their own pull request because they wanted to make some extra money, I really don't see how else something like that happens.
I mean,
Either you're
that's
totally
obviously
incompetent or you're malicious, right?
Well, we all know that's obviously what happened with Bytecoin. You know, the Monero developers found a flaw, patched their own stuff, and then just exploited Bytecoin. We all know. Everybody knows that. Well, I was going to make a different comment. In my opinion, Ravencoin was like, it had a sketchy start to begin with, period. Like, even though, like, I learned about it very shortly after it launched, just by random chance. But I took a look at it at the time. I'm like, you know what? They are looking to, in the future, claim that they had a really nice, widely advertised launch and, you know, fair launch, yada, yada, yada. But in the moment, there was all closed source binaries. There was no code. There was no description of what the project was. There was no reason to mine it, right?
Yeah, I remember hearing about it. And it wasn't as bad as Steam, but it was very not broadcast widely. And
Yeah,
it was,
and then like what, a month later, they're like, oh, it was super open. We were shocked by how many people were mining it. Like, just the whole thing was, in my opinion, it was a horrible way to launch a coin, and it seemed like a sneaky way to launch a coin to me. So I never liked that at all. I think I might even have some Raven. I have no idea. I was GPU mining on like day 3 or something, or no, CPU, and then the GPU one came out. The whole thing's a mess.
The thing that summarizes it for me is just to look at their Discord channel where they were discussing proof of work algorithms and proposals and all of that. And like the last proposal in that channel is, hey guys, I've now developed X17R for you.
To those who don't know, if you're watching the coffee chat here, if you see something like X16R or X11 or X12 or whatever, it basically just means it's an amalgamation of a bunch of different algorithms together, hoping that, oh, well, the ASIC doesn't know how to address this one yet. And we hope that no one will ever bother to build one that does. Is that a fair description, Howard?
Yeah, that's good.
So we definitely got a little off topic here today, but that's fine, I think. Any other off topic things? So, you know, it's an unusual day, unusual coffee chat. You know, new Monero, right? We're just talking about other projects. John, you're my go-to. What's going on in the shitcoin world? You know.
honestly, what's going on in the shitcoin world is clearly the whole decentralized finance movement. And I just can't keep up with it. It's like there's like a new one every week, and they get added to Coinbase, and it's just, that's like broadly speaking what's going on. And I mean, that's kind of what, the Haven people are kind of, they've been supposedly working on that for years, but they're finally launching, and that's kind of a very good time, I guess, in the midst of all of this DeFi mania going on.
I mean, the optimistic side of me hopes that it has some. They built out some tooling that will be useful, but who knows? I can't see a Haven stable coin competing with the Center's Circle or something like that, but we'll see. Hopefully,
Yeah.
it actually is private. That'd be cool if it actually like did have good ring signatures and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's so small that if it really worked, I mean, and it's kind of separate. I don't think there's a lot of consensus rules that are different from Monero. So if it really worked, I mean, it could be something that I think Monero could look at. I don't even know. I mean, if there's no changes to consensus required, it wouldn't necessarily need to be like core team or anything. It could be anybody kind of put it together and launch it.
Yeah, I'll need to take a look as more details are available, because I like the idea of a private stablecoin. But
I think I read that they're utilizing the CL SAG signatures, which are coming to Monero, I believe, right? So I mean, but I don't know if besides that they require any other consensus changes.
Yeah, CL-SAG is still being audited right now, isn't it?
Yeah, we're not
well,
done yet.
if your coin is only worth, I don't know, $10 million or whatever it's worth, then you can move fast and break things, right?
Yeah, like Sumo, I think, did similar stuff where they like, we have this before Monero.
Okay, we're back. Okay, sorry everybody. Jitsi actually stopped with its live streaming encoder. I had to restart it. Typically, I try to use OBS now, but I'm in a different location than I normally am, so we have issues. We were just about to wrap up, though. What was, I guess, the last thing that they may have missed? I don't know. Clearly it wasn't important. We don't talk about important things here anyway. You could just avoid the whole coffee chat. That's what you should be doing. Other miscellaneous things, Monero 0.16.0.1 CLI is out. Basically just a bunch of bug fixes. So if you're having issues with your like Ledger or Trezor or something, check that out. There's a DEF CON planning meeting in Monero-DEF CON right after this. So if you are interested in helping out there. Obviously, DEF CON is not an in-person event this year. That's just an online event. So lots of extra opportunities for people to help out. We want to try and make this year really, really interactive for people. All the random things. Oh, Andreas said during a recent stream that he uses Monero for privacy and encourages others to do the same. I guess one last thing to end on. How do we actually get people that are currently working, spending all their good effort trying to improve Bitcoin's privacy, only for it to be just completely wasted because no one's actually going to use it? How do we get these people interested to work on Monero because we're actually going to implement something that people will use?
I think that's a really tough question because, first of all, they're working, anybody working on a project like that has two motives, right? One, they're working on it because the technology is interesting to them, and two, they're hoping to get privacy on Bitcoin. If you tell them just to switch to Monero, I mean, half of their work goes away. So,
maybe, but there's so much stuff to do. I mean, we're not. There's so many things. I'm like, I wish I could look at that. I wish I could look at that in Monero.
Yeah, but if you're sitting there like you're building a Samurai wallet or something, and your focus is how do we develop this new privacy technology, and then Monero says, oh, we've already done this for you, then you have to switch focus, you have to switch gears to get into that, and so the intellectual draw isn't the same.
Okay. Scott or John, do you have any other thoughts?
I would just say money. I mean, it's not so much for Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin has kind of, this ubiquity, it's known around the world. People who come into the space without any knowledge of cryptocurrency, that's where they land. But Ethereum, has this huge pot of money, right, that they can, dole out, and they pay hundreds or thousands of people to develop technologies that build on the Ethereum network. And, like, for instance, the Tornado Cash is kind of relevant to Monero, which is like, it's essentially like a giant mixer that uses smart contracts, so you can mix your Ethereum stablecoins or your Ethereum, and I'm 99% sure that was funded by consensus. So just having more money to sponsor projects like that, which Monero does a pretty good job of, pulling itself up by its bootstraps, but it's at a bit of a disadvantage compared to Ethereum.
I would say that Ethereum is throwing money around on projects that nobody actually cares about, though.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of shit that they sponsor, right? But I mean, if they, if you get a diamond for every 100 pieces of coal or whatever, then it's, I guess, worth it in their eyes, right?
Maybe, but I mean, at a certain point, they'll have the same problem that Bitcoin has, that it'll never be implemented on the base layer, so it'll never be good enough.
Scott,
Yeah.
want to leave us with your final thoughts here?
Sure. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. We'll jump into the DEF CON meeting. So I know earlier, what are the questions? I'll address that first. Someone asked, are there any new or in the near future up and coming Monero events? And as you said, DEF CON, which is August 6th through 9th-ish this year. So if you're looking at Monero related events, follow the Monero Village Twitter account and go to monerovillage.org. Those are kind of the two primary official points for updates on that. So there'll be talks and general coffee chatting-ishness in the Discord that is the official DEF CON server. But to the last question that you asked, I think HIC kind of hit it on the head. For them, I think people have different motivations, but for like the people of Samurai Wallet, it's largely going to be intellectual. So, and you can see that they're watching the darknet markets, the street as they phrased it. So, I think if you see kind of Monero just absolutely destroy Bitcoin on the street, and then kind of they might see the war, kind of, for lack of a better metaphor, as lost, right? Because I mean that's kind of how Bitcoin kind of had its organic growth, was first in kind of these Silk Road and the like, and so they might just find that there's no intellectual kind of value in contributing to something that they might see as dead effectively. But yeah, so it's basically got to keep driving organic adoption and improving the tech so that more people will use it and making it easier for people to use it. So
got it. All right, on that note, I think I'm going to wrap up the coffee chat. Thank you for joining us on the 4th of July. John, Scott, Howard, enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll see everyone else really soon here.
All right.
Happy 4th, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.